I'm Eric Wolf, and my experience in business peer groups has changed my life, especially my membership in Vistage, one of the world's largest CEO advisory groups. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Vistage speaker on the power of marketing. This podcast is dedicated to the people who make those experiences possible, the peer group chairs. Every episode, I interview a Vistage chair who has dedicated their time to helping entrepreneurs like me succeed. Welcome to Chairwaves. My guest today is Craig James, a 10-year Vistage chairing veteran from Boston, Massachusetts, which is a fantastic city, home to a completely garbage baseball team, but we don't need to get too far into that. Are you from Boston, by the way?
I'm actually not from Boston, and if anybody listening to this podcast can tell where I am from my accent, they'll win a small prize.
Oh, okay. What can we get the answer just for?
You can. It is what is known as the Evil Empire here in Boston, just outside of New York City.
I was going to guess that. I'm also from New York City, so.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm a Bronx boy myself. So hey, welcome, Craig. By the way, that was a tangent, a little bit of a rabbit hole, but that's okay. It's fun.
Great to be here.
So yeah, tell me. I would love to hear. I would love to hear about your career arc, where you got started, what you thought was going to happen, and then what actually ended up happening, and ultimately we'll cover your road to Vistage. But one of the wonderful things about talking to Vistage chairs is that Vistage chairs have really good origin stories because nobody got out of college and said, I'm going to be a Vistage chair. So I'd really love to hear kind of where your whole professional arc took you. Let's hear your story.
No, happy to do so. And when I got out of college, I really wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I was always good with numbers, so I thought, well, maybe I'll go into the investment banking world. But when all the big Salomon Brothers and Merrill Lynch's and people like that came to campus and none of them offered me a job, I kind of thought that was a signal. And I ended up landing a job with a Fortune 50 multinational diversified company in Chicago in their corporate headquarters. It was an amazing first job for a kid out of college. I had a 54-story office, actual office, not a cubicle, overlooking Lake Michigan.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
You're
had
fancy.
no business at that age having an office like that, but I wasn't going to say no.
Yeah.
I was in the company's treasury department, so had absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing today. But it was a good environment in which to learn how to work, how to interact with other people, office politics, and things like that. I spent about 3 years there. Got my MBA at night. Went to work for a marketing consulting firm because I really felt a bit constrained in the role that I was in. I was managing the company's foreign exchange portfolio, which was rather narrow and esoteric. Working with a bunch of freshly minted MBAs like myself at the time had a lot of appeal. Did that for a few years. Took a Myers-Briggs assessment, which told me I would be really good at and enjoy three things. One of those was teaching.
Okay.
One of those was social work.
Okay.
And one of those, interestingly enough, which doesn't seem to fit in on the surface, was sales.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I guess I should listen to this. And I think I was about 27 or 28 at the time. And I thought, well, I really can't make a living and support a family on a social worker's income. At least I didn't think. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the same thing for teaching, but this whole sales thing, I'd never really considered that. My dad was a salesman his whole life. He sold what today is, I guess, considered an anachronism, encyclopedias. And so I never really considered that to be a profession until one day I was sitting at a buddy's house watching a football game, and it was halftime, and this guy sold commercial printing for a living. And on his bookshelf was a book by a guy named Tom Hopkins. Now, I didn't know who Tom Hopkins was at the time, but apparently he was a big sales guru, the kind of person that would fill up, well, here's the Fleet Center or Madison Square Garden, uh, $200 a pop with 20,000 people. And I know that because I actually spent $200 to go see this guy talk. And he said something very interesting in his book. He was a real estate broker. He said, I help people solve problems for a living and get paid well for it. And I thought to myself, well, gee, my dad sold encyclopedias. I didn't really see what kind of problem that he was solving for people. Until you think about the fact that he was selling mostly to immigrant families who, in many cases, didn't speak English. They were from Queens. And the problem that he was solving for those families was helping the second generation have a better life and
Right.
a potentially better income possibilities. And so, with that in mind, I embarked on a 8 or 10 year career in consultative sales, big ticket sales, primarily to the financial data and financial technology industry. And after that, I moved to New York, um, back to New York, where I joined a startup that didn't. uh, Leveraged that into a sales management job. And then along the way, met my wife, who is from Arlington, Massachusetts. We got married, moved back up here, and 10 years later, maybe 5 years later, not sure what, I ended up at Vistage.
So was as a you know as a salesperson, what looking back at that time
Mhm.
and your time in sales, um, do you think the test was accurate?
I do think it was accurate. I don't think I was destined to be a salesperson, which obviously I'm not today, but uh, a lot of the themes that came out of it, the desire to help people improve themselves, uh, that is what drives a good salesperson. And in fact, uh, after I moved to New York, several years after I moved to New York, I founded and started a sales consulting and training business because I had this, again, from the teaching
Yeah, that kind of
aspect,
scratched both
that
of those
was,
itches.
yeah, that was still kind of lurking in the background. And so that coupled with an entrepreneurial drive led me to start that. Um, and then my wife got a job up here. My situation was more fluid. I was an independent contractor at the time. So I followed her up here in 2006 or seven.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, you also in the midst of all of this worked as an adjunct professor at NYU. What
Hmm.
was what was
Yep.
that like?
Well, again, that was an extension of the teaching theme that came out of the Myers-Briggs. I had sent a proposed course to about 5 different universities in the greater New York area. I think it was 3 or 4 universities in the city, and then one in Brooklyn. Uh, Nothing ever happened with it. I just forgot about it. And one day I got a call from NYU, their School of Continuing and Professional Studies, and they said, we have your proposal on file. We actually have a course we need someone to teach, and we don't have anybody. So why don't you come on down and we'll talk about it? So I came on down and we talked about it. It was not your traditional, once or two times a week course for 8 or 12 weeks. It was a 2 day course for 8 hours on a Saturday and 8 hours on a Sunday, which was fine. But the topic they wanted me to teach was crafting your sales pitch.
Okay.
And I said, if I might suggest, I could probably teach this material in about 2 hours, which would leave 14 extra hours.
Hmm.
Would you be open to expanding the scope of this course to provide more value beyond just crafting a sales pitch? And they gleefully said yes. And I essentially wrapped my original proposal into that course.
Very cool. And how was that experience for you? And did it give you what you were looking for?
It It did. It was very enjoyable. It is so that the teaching I was doing this while I had my sales consulting and training business is very different from consulting. I'm sure you know, very different uh, from training or even coaching. It's literally teaching material, and the students in the class range anywhere from relatively young people in their 20s to one gentleman. He was in his late 50s. And when I went around the room to start asking him, why are you here? Why are you taking this course? And his answer, I'll never forget it, was, you're never too old to learn something new.
Hmm.
And I was, and I just had a blast with that course and did it for 2 years.
Okay. Very cool. How did you end up? How did you end up with Vistage?
I'll make a long story short, just in the essence of time. Uh, when I moved up to Boston, as I mentioned, I had a sales consulting business. I had been living in New York City. And I had a decision to make. My wife and I were both a little bit older than either of us had planned when we got married, so the concept of kids was front and center for us. And I thought, well, trying to reestablish a consulting business up here in Boston, which quite frankly is a pretty provincial place, um, not a great idea. Let me go get a W-2 job and make some money and do that. So I did that. And as part of that, I met a gentleman who was one of the first clients that we brought on board. This was a quasi startup that was perennially cash starved. But he and I got to know one another very well. And unfortunately, the company ran out of money. So we kind of went our separate ways. But we kind of stayed in touch. And about maybe a year and a half later, Phil Thomas, who was a gentleman who was a client of mine, calls me up and said, "Hey, I've become a Vistage chair." And I've had the chair role for about 8 or 12 months. And Vistage Corporate called me and wanted me to come on board as a senior vice president. And so I gave up my group, and part of my mandate is to bring on new people to become Vistage chairs. So that was the genesis of it. I didn't take the chair role immediately. At the time, my wife and I had just had our first daughter. So I could not really afford, I was the only one working, to take a flyer on something that might or might not work. I also had the benefits. But the idea was to do that job for a couple of years as more of an apprenticeship, learn the ropes, put some money away, and then in 2 years, when my wife is back to work and daughter is in daycare, approach Vistage and say, I'd like to become a Vistage chair, which happened in 2015. And I launched the group a year later in 2016. Non-conventional way of going about it, but that's my story.
Well, the really interesting thing about you guys is that even though you all, sort of end up in the same place of obviously being chairs and running groups and things like that, the paths that you take there are vastly different. And and if I've learned anything about Vistage chairs is that you guys all have, something unique that you're bringing to the table, which is really really nice. Um, what was the process like for you in launching your first group?
Well, it's like most Vistage chairs, not all, but most Vistage chairs will tell you it is one of the most challenging things you ever do. I sold six-figure software for many years with, 4 to 6 month sales cycles and 5 and 6 different decision makers and 2 and 3 competitors. This was orders of magnitude more difficult because you were selling a concept to people who, in many cases, have never heard of the concept, let alone of the company.
Right.
And so you're kissing a lot of frogs. But I will say that uh, it required a lot of persistence. It required a lot of effort and a little bit of luck here and there. But by hook or by crook, those of us who launch groups make it, and it's the best job I've ever had, and I would never look back.
Oh, that's incredible. And you're obviously not the first, nor will you be the last person to come on this podcast and talk about how incredibly, incredibly hard it was to start your first group. And there are folks that come on and say, hey, not only was this one of the hardest things I've ever done professionally, this was one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing that I've ever done in life. So it's a really common theme, and being that you did, run the gauntlet and make it, what advice would, for all the people who are going through Chair Academy and thinking about Vistage chairing, what would you say to those folks that are about to enter this, um, go through this process?
Yeah, I would say that Vistage has developed a finely tuned program. It works. So follow the process. Don't think you can shortcut it because you can't. Um, there are lots of bones scattered of people who tried to. Well, I know how to do this. I can, and they never became Vistage chairs. So follow the process. Use the resources you have available to you, both the human resources that Vistage provides, as well as the tools, templates, lists, and such. That's number one. And number two is look, most of the people who are in Academy um, were selected because they've been successful, either as a business owner or a CEO or a coach. So remember, you are talented. You've got what it takes to do this, and you will do it. Just have the right mindset.
Very cool. What? So you said, you said that you love what you do, and that you wouldn't trade it for anything. What are the highlights for you about being a Vistage chair? What are the things that you get to do now that you didn't get to do 10 years ago before you launched, that fills your cup, makes you want to get out of bed in the morning, all of that?
It's one of the few, well, it's really the only role that I've ever had in my life where you have a direct impact, some impact on the lives of the people in your groups. And I have two groups. I have a CEO group and a trusted advisors group. So I'm going to speak specifically to the CEO group. These are people who put it all on the line. They left the corporate world, they started a business, invested capital, invested time, put relationships on hold. And it's a lonely road. It's a difficult road. It's a stressful road. And to be able to share that road with them and have them on occasion tell me in our one-to-one coaching sessions that we have between the group meetings, as they oftentimes will do, it's just great to have you here, Craig, or thanks for this, or thanks for that, or this, thanks for building the group and all these great people that I never would have had access to help me, avoid going left when I should have gone right, and avoiding the minefields that I didn't see. Um, to be able to know that I had some small impact on both the business and, frankly, the lives of these people is tremendously gratifying. Tremendously gratifying.
That's amazing. What do you think? What do you think if you were to imagine from the perspective of one of your members, what do you think that they would say is transformative about being in a Vistage group?
They would say one of two things. Uh, One is having a place, a physical place and space to come once a month to get away from the chaos and the weeds that is their business, and to be surrounded by people just like them running different, vastly different businesses, but the same makeup.
Right.
I've got an idea. I want to build something and I want to grow it and have a great company and great, happy employees and great customers. Um, and I can be there and get support and get challenged, as we often do, but know that everybody around that table has my back and they have uh, no skin in the game other than they just want to help me make the best decisions and have the best life that I can as I do with them. That's, I think, what they'd say. And part of it also is the camaraderie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, oh, we have a lot of fun and we get stuff done, but it's, some of my members run remote businesses. They work out of their home office. They don't have the socialization that you have in an office. So to be able to have that community, as it were, once a month is worth its weight in gold for some members.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned in the last 10 years of doing this and working with these folks?
The biggest thing I've learned is well, I don't know if there's a biggest thing, but I think one of the biggest things is, well, two things. One is when I first got involved with this, with Vistage, they said that one of the key things that your members are going to, that CEOs want is accountability. And I thought to myself, these are people running businesses. They're not 12-year-old children. Why would they need to be held accountable? They know what to do. And what I learned was it's a big difference between knowing what you need to do and actually doing what you need to do.
Yes.
And oftentimes that comes about because you just have too many things to do, particularly the size companies in Vistage, which are lower middle market. You don't have 3 or 4 levels of executives to delegate to. So the need for and the desire for accountability is real. They want me and the rest of the group to make sure that when they say they're going to do X because of Y, that they don't get distracted. And if they do get distracted, we'll pull them back. I would say that is probably the number one surprise, if you will, that I've learned or learned early on and have continued to be impressed with.
Very cool. That's a great learning to have after 10 years of being a chair and working with these folks. Um, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about, in addition to being a Vistage chair, you also are a business advisor with Wow Business Advisory. Tell me about that and how that fits into your practice.
Yeah, real briefly, I was approached a few years ago by a gentleman who had spent years in corporate America, as many of us have, retired, but couldn't stay retired. So he decided to do consulting, and he is in Ohio and was working with a lot of small businesses, a lot of businesses the size of Vistage companies. And what he found was that the processes and the procedures and the structures and the well-oiled machine that he had worked in all those years wasn't even close in a lot of these businesses. Um, there was no mission statement. No one knew how to do a SWOT analysis, let alone know what it was. They oftentimes didn't have the right people in the right seat because they didn't know, well, how do you write a job description? Well, how do you keep people accountable? How do you do metrics? So he wrote a book called The Five Ps, that's the letter P to a Wow Business, back in 2013, which he hoped would be read by business owners across the country and help them improve their businesses. Well, as it turns out, a couple of things. One, it didn't really move the needle. Number one, because, well, nobody really knew the book was out there. And number two, how many CEOs do you know take the time to read books? Some do. Many of my members do. So then he created a website thinking that might do the trick, and well, that didn't work. So he realized or was told that he needed to get distribution. He needed to get people in the communities who had relationships with the people that he wanted to impact and the companies that he wanted to impact. And I got an email from him 2 years ago, very nicely written, the kind that you oftentimes would hit the delete key on, but it was very respectful. Here's what I'm looking to do. Are you interested? And we had a few conversations, and I became his New England authorized advisor. And essentially, what they do is provide a set of tools, workbooks, and videos to go into the very same demographic as Vistage members, that lower middle market. Put them through an assessment, and in many cases, it's sort of a red, yellow, green, and it's usually a yellow or red. And then you just work with the owner of the business and his or her leadership team over the course of a year. It's usually a monthly 4 hour meeting, every other month, perhaps, depending on the availability of the client, um, to help them basically fill the gaps in their business so that number one, they have a better run business, which is more fun to run. Secondly, a more valuable business. So if
Mhm.
someone comes knocking on their door, they'll look at that business and they won't just say, oh, not a bad business, but I'll move on. They'll look at it and say, wow, this is a business that I want to buy
Okay.
and pay top dollar for.
And that's where the wow comes from. Very cool. Well, Craig, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being my guest. If folks have questions about Vistage, about your groups, about WoW, about how to survive as a New Yorker um, in in Boston, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So I will give my LLC's email address because that is the more all-encompassing one. It's craig.james at Westwood, which is the name of my town, Westwood Exec Dev, that's EXECDEV.com.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
Eric, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thanks for listening to this episode of Chairwaves. You can subscribe to our feed using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your platform of choice. You can also visit chairwaves.com for more information. Chairwaves is hosted and produced by me, Eric Wolf, and to connect with me, you can visit my website at ewolf.live. That's EWOLF.live. And a disclaimer, while I love Vistage and CEO peer groups, this podcast is not owned by or affiliated with Vistage or any other peer organization. Thanks for listening.